Hi, and thank you for volunteering for Chesapeake Bay Foundation's Clean the Bay Day. If you're viewing this video, you have probably already signed up to be a zone captain, and for that we thank you. Or maybe you're just interested to know more about how we put on this massive event. This PowerPoint is intended to tell you what you need to know, the basics, to have a safe, productive, and effective event on Clean the Bay Day. Clean the Bay Day is held on the first Saturday in June each year from 9 a.m. to noon. There are hundreds of sites all over the state with a strong concentration in Hampton Roads, as well as the Eastern Shore, Northern Virginia, and western parts of the state. It is one of the largest volunteer programs in the state, and it relies on volunteer support to put the event on each year. As you can see here, we have our website, our phone number, and our email to get in touch with the program. So this presentation, we're going to go over a little bit of background on Clean the Bay Day, why we do Clean the Bay Day, the zone captain responsibilities, an overview of the actual day, the materials that you'll rely on to conduct your event, and we will have an opportunity to show you where you can ask further questions. I will note that there's a zone captain guide which is available on our website at cbf.org/clean that you may refer to as well, which has a very detailed document. So Clean the Bay Day began in 1989 by a group of volunteers in Virginia Beach, just sitting around a kitchen table and decided to put on a cleanup each year after Memorial Day weekend. From there, the program spread like wildfire, and to all the neighboring cities, the Department of Defense picked it up, and it has again grown up to the Eastern Shore, to Northern Virginia, and all across the state. It is predicated on the cooperation of many and varied partner organizations, so nonprofits, private companies, corporations, municipalities, civic groups, scout groups, church groups, you name it. They all come together to put on this massive event each year. You can see some stats here, some pretty big numbers that have been put up in just the first 29 years of the program. And all of this occurs just in 3 hours each year. So there are about 100 partners and sponsors, of which you can see this year's sponsors and partners on the cbf.org/clean website. So why Clean the Bay Day? Why do we do this? Well, first of all, there are many threats facing the Chesapeake Bay. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment chief among them. But litter is a very, very visible problem, and it's perhaps one of the easiest problems to solve. On one hand, you could just simply one could just not throw litter on the ground. And on the other hand, it's fairly easy to pick up, whereas nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, and other pollutants are very, very difficult to remove from water once they're already in there. The problem with litter, first of all, it's ugly. It's an aesthetic detriment. When you're canoeing or hiking, the last thing you want to see is a piece of trash reminding you breaking that kind of piece in nature. But it may be a source of water pollution, which we'll look at. And that can be harmful to both humans and especially wildlife. And where there's smoke, there's fire. Where we see litter, there's often unseen, more insidious and harmful pollutants working their way through that part of the watershed. So in a lot of cases, when we see areas that are heavily littered, it's an indicator of bigger problems happening just underneath the surface. There have been a number of studies that show a correlation between litter and crime. So an area that is experiencing crime, they will go in and they've shown that when they clean up the streets, that crime drops precipitously. And that is a kind of a remarkable phenomenon. What we see is in communities that are cleaner, we typically see happier and healthier communities. And perhaps most importantly, a lot of the pollutants that we're talking about, a lot of the litter that we're talking about here, particularly plastics and some of the heavy metals, they will be in the system, as we'll see, effectively forever, unless someone comes out and pulls out that debris by hand. So this slide just shows some of the heavy impacts. We won't go through each one of them. You can pause here and look and see why litter is such a big problem. But just to give you an idea, when we say that plastics and heavy metals are effectively permanent, we'll go to this next slide. So you can see here how long some of these very common items that are found on Clean the Bay Day will last in the environment. For the record, disposable nappies is a term for diapers. So what does Clean the Bay Day accomplish? First of all, we remove that harmful litter and debris. Something like plastics are always breaking down through the system, and they're working their way through the watershed, and Clean the Bay Day stops that litter in its tracks. It improves the sites for humans and wildlife in the short term and the long term. It engages the community, an amazing phenomenon of Clean the Bay Day. Again, as we mentioned, there are many disparate and varied partners that come together for a common cause here. And it sets an example for kids, it sets an example for the community, and it sets an example for decision makers. Our elected officials often come out to Clean the Bay Day, and they're able to see their constituents voluntarily rolling up their sleeves in the name of clean water. So down to the brass tacks of being a zone captain. Here are some of the basics. As a zone captain, your job is to direct the volunteers. It's very tempting. Everybody wants to get in the water and help pull out that tire or remove that car battery from the sand. But as a zone captain, your job really is not as much to remove litter as to facilitate the entire event. So being aware of what your volunteers are doing, being aware of the site itself, and keeping your head on a swivel and helping out the volunteers during the 3-hour cleanup is the chief concern. It starts at approximately 8:30 or 8:45 in the morning when your volunteers will begin to arrive. Registration is incredibly important. There are registration forms at each site. We need volunteers to fill out these registration forms for a couple of reasons. First of all, there's contact information that we like to have that we can thank our volunteers and alert them of other environmental issues that may be of concern and interest to them. But most importantly, the registration form serves as a liability release form, which indemnifies the Bay Foundation and volunteers from potential hazards that can happen on Clean the Bay Day. For the record, Clean the Bay Day is a very, very safe event. And that's because we have great zone captains out there that are keeping an eye on the event. During that registration process, you may see minors come through. We welcome all minors, and we have lots of families, but if we have someone that's there under 18, they should have a parental permission form with them. We alert all volunteers of this necessity in advance of the program, but we also provide those forms so if they are dropped off, they can quickly have a form signed out for them. Once everybody's signed in, you'll conduct a safety discussion, and we'll go over that. And there's a note here on 3 different types of zones. The most common cleanup site is a standard one-size-fits-all. That's for everybody from the baby to the grandparent to attend. We also have boaters-only sites, which are on water, which means that there are canoes, kayaks, or small craft that are out there participating in a cleanup and working the shoreline that way. We also have 18 and over, or what we call sometimes challenging sites. These may be in more dangerous areas where we don't want to send children or older folks, perhaps alongside of a busy highway, or in an environmentally sensitive area. You will direct your volunteers to work in small groups to maximize coverage and to record the data, and also for safety reasons. And all trash is compiled in 1 or 2 locations. Those are the basics. Now let's get into some of the details of that. Registration, again, is key. Making sure that everybody signs in on those forms is what makes this program legal and in that sense possible. If you're expecting a large amount of volunteers at your site, say over 40 or 50 volunteers, we recommend that you designate a registration captain. A registration captain can be pretty much anyone. It can be a teenager, it can be a spouse, it can be a friend. This person is just going to help make sure that everybody that comes onto your site does register, because around 8:30 or 8:45 is when everybody shows up, and they typically show up around the same time. So that person will just make sure everybody signs in and signs their name, and to encourage legible handwriting, and possibly even alert them of what's going to happen out there that day. All volunteers, for the record, will be offered a discount CBF membership. It's something we do each year. You can see in this photo, we have a group of what looks to be about 75, 80 volunteers. And of course, they probably all showed up at the same time. So you can see the little registration table they had up front, and they were prepared for this. So if you're prepared for it, trust me, it'll save you a lot of stress right there at the beginning of your event. Registration requirements are very, very simple. We just ask for name, address, phone, email, and we ask that they print and sign their name. Families can sign up under one entry. So you have an example here, John and Pocahontas Smith, plus their 3 kids. And then under 18, again, requires a parental permission form. So the volunteer briefing. This is where you'll address the volunteers gathered there, and this is where you'll kind of set the tone for the cleanup. I will say that one of the most important things that you can do is to get there early to check out your site. You're going to want to look, walk the length or the breadth of your site if possible to look for any hazards. That could be anything from a 55-gallon drum that's washed up on the beach that you want to caution volunteers against. Maybe there's a patch of poison ivy. Maybe there is some nesting going on, and these are all things that you want to be aware of so you can speak to what's going on at the site to your volunteers. So once around 8:45, 9 o'clock, you've got all your volunteers gathered together. I would say the first thing to do is thank them. I don't think we can thank our volunteers enough. You can ensure that all volunteers have signed in by just asking for a show of hands. Raise your hand if you have signed in. Raise your hand if you haven't signed in. And if they haven't signed in, just ask them to circle back with you after the volunteer briefing. You'll want to ask that all volunteers ask to check out with you. So if they decide to leave early, just ask them to please come by and say goodbye before they go. Because you want to start your event and end your event with the same number of volunteers. If that number is different, it means you may have lost someone. You're going to want to review safety for the site. Most of our safety is very common sense, and will just impress that this is designed to be an enjoyable 3-hour volunteer event. So tell your volunteers to take it easy, whether it's really hot outside or wet. You can tell everybody just to do their best, but not to overdo it. Some of the other keys about safety are wear gloves, where applicable, where possible. We do not pick up broken glass. We do not pick up any sort of dead animals. If it is organic, we will leave it on the site. If you see anything, if there's anything at all of concern, like a 55-gallon drum, any sort of medical waste, any sort of drug paraphernalia, we ask that the volunteers do not pick it up and that they should alert you of that. You want to show the volunteers where they're going to put all their litter. So as they're filling up bags, where do they put those bags? We want to have all the litter tightly organized for a couple of reasons. One, if we don't have it all in one place, it means that not all the litter will be possibly picked up. Number two, you'll be able to look at that pile at the end of the event and come up with a good sense of how much debris was removed, and that's part of your data. We're going to get to that in a moment. And number three, keep in mind that the people that come and pick up this litter is someone's mother or someone's father or human beings just like us. We want to make their job as easy as possible. I did go over what to collect and what not to collect briefly, but I just want to reiterate, if when in doubt, leave it on the ground. Another important point is, for all intents and purposes, unless directed otherwise, we do not separate recycled materials. The reason is that in most cases, the materials that we find are in a state outside in the resource that they've been degraded to the point that they are not suited for recycling. So unless you're directed otherwise, there's no need to spend the extra time to sort the recyclables. Just getting it out of the resource is a great job. The volunteer data card. So those are the little yellow cards that we give out to groups or clusters of volunteers. That is akin to your zone captain report, which again we'll get to in just a moment. But that's where they can fill out what they found. They take a tiny snapshot of their event. When you have all those yellow cards returned, you can put all those together to have a more comprehensive snapshot of what happened overall at the site today. Again, caution regarding sensitive habitat. We mentioned poison ivy or possibly nesting sites, but also we want to keep volunteers off of the dunes or off of stream banks. Going up and down dunes or going up and down the banks causes erosion could do more harm than good. So you're in a situation where someone sees a plastic bottle at the bottom of the bank. Is it really worth running up and down that bank to get one plastic bottle when you're causing damage to the riverbank itself? Again, when in doubt, just leave it on the ground. When you have all your volunteers gathered together, this is the time to take a good head count. A head count is far more reliable than your registration forms. Although everyone should sign on those forms, it's really good to make a count of how many bodies you actually have there. From there, you can split them into teams, wish them a good cleanup, and ask them to meet you back in 3 hours or by 12 o'clock. You will have volunteers that want to work later in some cases. It's very admirable, but the program is designed to be a lightweight 3-hour cleanup. And keep in mind that your small role, the small 3 hours across the entire state, has a massive cumulative impact. And then thank the volunteers again, because again, I don't think we can thank them enough. So here's where the real kind of work comes in, is the reporting of the data. This is what you'll send back to your local coordinator, and this is how we determine the success of the cleanup each year. So there are 3 primary points to the data. The first is distance. This is reported in miles or points of a mile, and should be determined in advance by your coordinator. But you can get a pretty good sense if you're looking down a beach or a riverbank, if you're going to be doing an 1/8 of a mile, a 1/10 of a mile, a 1/2 mile. Your estimated total weight. So there is a special key on the data cards that show common items. So the weight of a tire or the weight of a dishwasher. A trash bag is typically, for example, 15 to 25 pounds. The whole idea is for you to be able to, in a reasonably quick amount of time, is to determine about the weight. This is not an exact science. Just give it your best guess. And finally, your number of volunteers. This is a finite number. You should know exactly how many volunteers were at the site, including yourself. And again, this number should be the same at the beginning and at the end. Finally, you'll call the data into your area coordinator. We ask that we get the numbers reported to us no later than 2 p.m. so that we can pull all the numbers together from all over the state and get it out to press and other interested parties before the end of the day. All your materials, whether they were signed, written on, or unused, can be returned in one box to your local coordinator. If they were not used, we can use those materials again the next year. So just a quick overview of all the materials that you'll have. Your Zone Captain Guide, which is I mentioned to you, is a very detailed document which will tell you everything you wanted to know, and in some cases more, about doing a litter cleanup. The second is your volunteer sign-in form. Those are those ever important registration forms that volunteers all sign in when they enter the site. Your parental permission slips, again for children on site without parents or a guardian under the age of 18. Your Zone Captain report is the large white report card on cardstock. This is your final report. This is what you can use the back for scratch paper, and then the front you can enter all your data. And this is what you'll call into your area coordinator. This could be the aggregate or the combination of all those little yellow data cards. The Zone Captain report is fairly self-explanatory. There will be a t-shirt or patch order forms in some cases at your sites. The certificates are certificates of appreciation that some volunteers will want to recognize the hours that they contributed that day in service to the community, and we have those available as well. You may have posters and bookmarks in your package, and you can use those in advance of the cleanup. We have a photo contest that we run each year. You'll have those, and you can distribute those to volunteers as well, and that's also very self-explanatory. You take a photo and you basically email it or hashtag it through social media. And your Zone Captain hat, which is always very exciting. Other materials to bring, trash bags, gloves will be provided by your local coordinator. Pencils or something to write with. This is for the volunteers or for registration. Your coordinator can provide these to you, And just a tip, if you ever need a box of little pencils, if you go to a golf course and tell them that you're working for local water quality, they're likely to give you a box of pencils. Always wear closed-toed footwear for any cleanup, even if it's on the beach. You never know what you're going to pick up and find and possibly drop. Sunscreen, insect repellent, and water are also good ideas to bring. So in review, spread the word. You can refer volunteers to cbf.org/clean to sign up. You can help promote the event and to help build those numbers. Check your zone out ahead of time. Assign a registration captain if needed. Arrive early. Trust me, it'll reduce your stress that day. Make sure to register all volunteers on the registration forms. You'll distribute the supplies. You'll have your safety briefing and go over the kind of data that we're looking for. And then you'll supervise the cleanup. And that really does mean walking back and forth, checking on volunteers to see if they need a new trash bag, if you can take a full trash bag back, if they need water, that sort of thing. You'll collect all the paperwork. You'll compile the statistics and then report that data as soon as possible or no later than 2 p.m. And finally, return all your paperwork to your area coordinator by the Friday after the event is what's recommended, but you can return it as soon as possible. If you have more questions about the program, we implore you to reach out to us at the Bay Foundation at the email address listed here, ctbd@cbf.org, or you can call our office at 757-622-1964. We really can't thank you all enough. You zone captains taking on this additional level of responsibility is the glue that holds the program together. You are the link between the partners and all the volunteers, and we thank you very, very much. So happy Clean the Bay Day and good luck out there. Thank you.